Okay, so my name's Sean. From Phoenix. I actually just flew in an hour ago, and you guys have some kind of convention in town right now because there's no rental cars available. But we're going to be talking about Trac tonight, and Trac is a tool that lets you effectively manage software projects, and it's no less important than the testing was that we just talked about. So my goal tonight, if you come away with anything, just really get your head around what is Trac, how it can help you. I heard two gentlemen in the back that were talking about Jira when I came in. Jira is a Trac competitor. It's a commercial application, but it's pretty much, it serves the same purpose. So if you're interested in Jira, you'll probably be interested in what we're going to talk about tonight. The other goal I have, secondary, but my company is JumpBox, and we take open source applications like Trac, and we make them very easy to install. And so if anyone, I don't know, has anyone used Trac here before? Did you actually set it up, or yeah? How long did it take you, or can you speak to that?
I think an hour. Figure it out.
Oh, really? Okay. My partner is purely technical. Trac was actually the inspiration for us starting the company that we did, JumpBox, which is this idea of creating virtual appliances around that encapsulate open source applications. Trac took us, like 2 days to get it all integrated, talking to Subversion, driven off of the same user accounts and everything. It took us like a good 2 days to set up. He's extremely technical. So I mean, the secondary goal here is just to see kind of the advantage of using something like JumpBox if you do want to use Trac. We make it freely available, so it's good to know. Real quick poll. How many people use open source development tools here? So pretty much everyone. I saw clips up before. What other stuff do you guys use?
Cruise control.
Cruise control, Subversion. Cool. Okay, so source control, use Subversion. What about issue tracking tools? I heard
Scala.
Scala?
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard that one. Mylar.
Mylan now.
Bugzilla is one. Okay, so you guys are already using some issue tracking tools, so you recognize that one. So, one fellow uses Trac. Anyone else ever used Trac before? Okay, awesome. Then this will be an introduction for anyone. What about virtualization? Does anyone use desktop virtualization or server? Both? Okay, awesome. Okay, before we go into the details of Trac, let's kind of take like the 50,000 foot view of what makes good project management. And I'll just ask you, what of the projects you're in, when it's really gunning smoothly, what is it about it? Like, what makes a good tool for project management? What are some?
It's invisible.
Invisible?
So
So unobtrusive. It doesn't impede your development. Right?
If you're writing code, I don't want to have to keep track of the time I'm taking to write the code or to test it or anything else. I just wanted to inform my manager that this is what we're doing and this is where we are.
So you hit on two really key points there, and I consider them different because the unobtrusiveness factor of not impeding your ability to develop, it shouldn't get in your way. If it's stopping you up, then that's a terrible project management tool, right? But the other thing that you just hit on, I put some aspects up here and I'll kind of push them out. Accountability. It should really, a good project management tool should, project management is all about accountability. You got to know, nothing should slip through the cracks. Once you identify all the requirements, all the things that need to get done, all the issues or story cards, I heard you guys talking about Jira. Once you identify all those, it just means nothing slips through the cracks and everyone knows what everyone's working on. So the accountability factor should have some concept of scheduling to it, because what good is a project if you have no deadline for it? So it should incorporate that. Along the same lines as scheduling, forecasting, which is slightly different. Once you're in the project and you're going, you need to kind of see where you're at and see if you're going to make that release when you need to, and how close you are and what's left to be done. And so therefore, in the same way that like accounting packages are not merely just for tracking what's going on in a business, they're actually a decision-making tool. It lets you make decisions about, hey, we're going to slip this release. We need to bump these 5 features because we're not going to make it. Or maybe we're ahead of schedule. Can we pull some features from the next release into this one? So it's a decision-making tool as well. Passive communication, which is the other one that you hit on. Has anyone read Alistair Cockburn or familiar with that? Okay, so his concept of the information radiator, which is a great idea. It's like, if you've ever been on a project where you do something and you have to send an email to everyone and say, hey, I just changed this, that's no good because you're going to get this just crossfire of emails growing. Everything gets lost in the noise. It's a terrible way to handle it. ideally it should work where you just do your thing, and implicitly it notifies, it's a radiator of information. It's just the central source that's just constantly casting off these developments of what's changing in the project. And you just consume it as you want, whether that's RSS or email or however you choose to consume that information. Situational awareness, just when you're in a corner of the project working on your own thing, you should still be able to be aware of kind of the big picture and what other people are doing. It's kind of like, I call it court presence. It's like what they say in the NBA when players, like a good guard knows where everyone else is on the court and knows what's going on. Same thing in a project. If you're in a little corner of the project, it's great to still be able to know what else is going on and chime in. If your buddy has some question, what if you see some changes go by and you say, hey, I know what he's struggling with, I can help him pass that blockage. So that's another aspect. It's great. And then along the same lines, efficient knowledge transfer. Alistair Coburn, another concept that he talks about a lot, is this concept of erg seconds. It's this, like how difficult it is to transmit a piece of information to the rest of the team. And so the better project management tools, just very low friction, it just works. It's out there doing its thing. It doesn't take a lot of energy to communicate the information. Ideally, it should integrate with existing tools. You shouldn't have to, just because you want to use Trac doesn't mean you should be forced to use Subversion if you don't use Subversion. If you're using JIT or one of these other Perforce or other source control management tools, it should just integrate with the tools. It should be able to be open. And then the last thing is just like we said, the unobtrusive. It gets in your way. It's not a good thing. It's not going to help you develop. So specifically, what is Trac? Trac is like Jira. It is issue tracking and integrated wiki. And it has hooks for different revision control systems. It comes, integrates natively with Subversion, but it also works with things like Perforce and JIT and Darks and some of these other distributed source control. It allows you to link physical code to logical features. That's a critical aspect of what it does. So you say, I need this piece of functionality, the thing we're just doing with the Revizi boards. I need this core piece of functionality for this game. That consists of, let's say, 5 files or 5 things that change. So being able to tie that physical code to the logical feature. And then ideally, the project management tool allows you to just grow the documentation organically. If you have to think ahead of time about, start on a new project and you have to think all the way out how you need to structure the documentation for the project, that's not really good. Ideally, you just want to start with the minimum stuff that you need and then just flesh that out as you need it and grow it organically. And the wiki and Trac allows you to do just that. So let's dig in here. Fictional scenario using Trac. I think the best way to learn anything is really to make it tangible and to go through like we did before. Just take a concrete scenario and walk through it. So I'm going to use an actual piece of code that I wrote to migrate my blog. This was like a year ago. I migrated my blog into WordPress, which if anyone's familiar with that, it's another open source blogging tool. So it's a really simple little utility. And I didn't take it beyond that. But we're going to do a project here. And these are the requirements of the project. We're going to add a second developer. We're going to add support for PostgreSQL. We're going to add support for the latest version of WordPress, make enhancements to the UI, change the licensing to the GPL v3, add multilingual support, and all with the goal of being able to ship a 1.0 version by New Year's. So we're not actually going to write, we're going to write pseudocode. We're not actually going to write all that code. But that's like the big picture of what we're trying to do here. And this is the scenario for the project that we're going to dive into. So let's go now into Trac. And this is where I've already actually set up the JumpBox. I just booted it. The JumpBox is essentially a mini virtual computer with Trac already installed on it. So I've already loaded that up under Parallels. If anyone, do you guys use mostly Windows machines? Linux? A lot of Linux. Raise your hand if you use Windows. Okay, Windows. How many people use Linux?
You got what we want here, or sometimes
You're ideal. What about Macs? Okay. So our stuff works on Zen, which is Linux, works on Parallels, VMware, Microsoft Virtualization, any of these virtualization platforms. I happen to be running it in Parallels right now. But this gives you, when you boot it up, it gives you the IP address that you can see right here. And so we're going to put that into a web browser. And And the only thing that we skipped in the beginning was just that time to load it up. So I haven't actually configured this yet, but it's pretty easy. There's only one screen of configuration with a JumpBox.
Did you recently put Drupal and Subversion to VMware appliances?
Yes.
Was that your company?
Yeah,
I
we're.
downloaded Drupal recently.
Yeah,
Was that
that's
yours?
we did the Drupal JumpBox too.
Okay, I wasn't sure about the JumpBox. Sounds right.
So this is the first screen you get once you boot it up and you open up a web browser to it. And so I'm just going to give it a name and give it just a random email address here. And let's see. I think, is this the same time zone as Los Angeles? Give it a password, agree to the agreement, and click configure. And this is the one configuration step that we need to do to have a fully set up instance of Trac. So right now it's actually changing some parameters internally, and it's creating our admin account. And when it finishes, we have Trac. So this is the homepage of Trac, and this stuff right here is actually information specific to JumpBox, but the stuff underneath it is what you get on a vanilla install of Trac. And this has links to various documentation, explains how the wiki formatting works. And
Do you have to use that instance of SVN, or can you use your existing?
Well, we bundle everything like SVN. We have an SVN server running in there, so it comes bundled together. But there's nothing that says you couldn't, just go under the hood.
Configure it to.
Yeah, it's already configured. It's set up.
No, I mean you can configure it to use your existing.
Right, because it's just an instance of Trac. You could go in and change the parameters. So this is our Trac instance, and the first thing that we want to do out of the box is set up. We've got our admin user. We want to log in as the admin and set up a new user. So I'm just using the password that I set when I configured it. You can see it opened that little admin tab. And actually, let me tell you real quick what you're looking at here, because this is the primary navigation here, and we'll go through these sections and talk about what they do. Up here you have the secondary navigation, just related to search and account level stuff. And then here you have the context sensitive navigation. So that changes depending on what page you're on. Those links. So let's go in. We've logged in, go into the admin tab. First thing we want to do is create a user. So there's our admin user. I'm going to set up a user for myself. Okay. And so does everyone use source control? Is there anyone who doesn't use source control here that's willing to admit it? Okay. So we'll not focus that much on the subversion aspect of it, but we do need to use it just to show you some change sets and commit some code. So this is that piece of code that I told you about. This is the blog utility that I wrote. And it's really simple. There's just a handful of files in there. And what I'm going to do is create a space on my desktop for my working copy. And there's different ways to check out code. I'm not a command line guy. I actually like just using GUI tools. It's probably unfavorable in this room, but I use something on my Mac. There's the Tortoise SVN if you're on Windows. I'm sure there's stuff for Linux. On the Mac, I use one that's called SC plugin. And so what I do is just let's go back and grab the URL that it gave us right here. This is our Subversion repository. So grab that URL, go into the working copy, and check out the repository. Okay, and there's nothing there because it's a blank repository. But you can see now the little graphical client thing has the check mark to say that it's checked out, everything's up to date. So now let's move. Sorry, here stuff flying around. Let's move those files into there. And let's commit that code. And we'll just call this, the commit message will say initial commit. Okay. And the way we verify this tab here, browse source, it's just a web-based source browser, lets you go in and see that all those files are indeed there. And they're on revision 1, it gives you the size, some other stuff, who checked it in, when they checked it in. Okay, great, so we've got our initial code in there. Let's go in, let's make a ticket and just start changing stuff. So tickets are really like the heart of Trac. The ticket, like story card, represents one issue, one thing that needs to be done, one discrete bit of functionality in what you're creating. So let's say the things that we wanted to do, we wanted to add support for Postgres. And we'll kind of ignore all this stuff for now and hit that later. But at the very minimal, if you just do that much, you can assign the ticket. There's our ticket. You go in and you see under active tickets that that's what we just created. So let's go just do some quick pseudocode. We're not actually going to write real code here, but let's say edit a few files and pretend like we made, we added the support for Postgres. So add in some stuff here. Maybe the INI file changes. Okay, let's say that was enough to now give our system what the support for PostgreSQL. Check in that code. If we go back to our source browser, we should be able to verify that those two files are now in revision 2. So, at this point, we've that ticket that we created, we can go in and close it out. And that's not very interesting because it's just us working at this point. It's pretty simple. Like in all reality, we wouldn't be using Trac for just ourselves at this point. But that's just to show kind of how it works. So let's close that out and do something a little more complicated.
Do you need to put in your issue or ticket number in your commit message in order to have it picked up?
Yeah, actually that's interesting that you bring this up. So there's support for what's called post-commit hooks with Trac, or with Subversion, and you don't have to do that, but if you have the post-commit hook installed, you can actually interact with Trac without even going through the web interface. You can do it right from your commit message in Subversion. So if I check that code in and I say fixes number 1, then it'll actually close out my ticket for me, and it'll relate those two, which is pretty useful to do. It lets you know what commit messages handle what features.
It doesn't automatically do that for you. It doesn't say, you know, when you close this, these are the changes that happened since you worked on the last thing.
Say that again? So
when you close a ticket, it doesn't take a look and say, what have you changed? You know, if you close ticket 1, change some stuff, close ticket 2,
Mhm.
it won't automatically say, this is the stuff that changed when you closed 2 since the last one.
yeah, well no, that's actually what the timeline gives you. So here you can see the timeline is like the chronology of what is changing in your project over time. And it shows you everything from changes to the documentation on the wiki, tickets that were open and closed, stuff that was change sets that were committed. And from here you can go in and see, I like to use the side-by-side comparison. But you can actually see the files and how they change. Is that kind of what you mean? Yeah. So it's just like a simple diff utility that shows you. And yeah, that's really useful too, just having that timeline, being able to look in one spot and see exactly what's happened on the project up to the minute. So let's do something a little more complicated now. Let's let's go back, and our business, we're gonna try to make a go at this and add another person and have another developer working with us here. So,
You
what's
still
your
have
name?
not excuse, right?
OGUN.
OGU.
You still have not related those two changes with your ticket.
Yeah, we don't, that's because we don't have the post-commit hook installed. That's something that, it's a plugin, it's a way to extend Trac, and we'll talk about it at the end, but, so.
I think though, if you have Mylan installed,
It
and
does.
Trac connector from a Mylan, it'll do it for you automatically.
Okay.
Mylan booster.
Is Mylan, do you know how it differs from Subversion, or is it just?
It's
kind
not
of
in there. It's a plug into Eclipse to manage issues. And it's
Okay, I have seen that. It brings your tickets into Eclipse. Okay, I have seen that. Cool. All right, awesome. So I'm learning something. Okay, so we just added Ogun as a user, and we're now going to go in and give him the rest of our tickets because we're lazy. We're making it stuff. All right, so the other stuff that we wanted to do, we need to make some UI enhancement. And actually, before we do that, let me, we're going to make this a little more useful for our particular scenario. We're going to go customize Trac a little bit. And let's see, we're going to create some components are kind of like just logical divisions in your work. So for this scenario with this blog utility that we have, maybe the front end is one aspect of it, and let's say I'm in charge of that, and the back end is Ogun, and maybe documentation is something else that we'll eventually need to have, and admin. And okay, and milestones are just obviously like quantifiable release states that we want to have. So commonly alpha, and let's say alpha is going to be due on Halloween, and we want to be to beta by Thanksgiving, and we want to have our 1.0 release ship on Christmas Day. Is what you're
Because you're a motivational manager.
That's right.
Bonus, you gotta have life.
Priorities, we'll leave those as they are. We're not going to use severity for right now, but we'll see something, a little kind of hack that we can play with that later. Ticket types, that's fine.
Can you add customized fields per ticket type?
Customized field, yeah. So we like another type of, so what, like a
So
bug?
if you
or
wanted to create something called a use case, for example, and have additional fields like, I don't know, testable criteria or something
that are
like
unique to use case, that
They're
ticket
unique
type?
to use cases. They're not going to appear in tasks. They're not going to appear in enhancements or anything else. Is there a way to do that?
I'm sure there is. I don't know offhand how you do that, but I know that it's very extensible, and there's probably, I mean, I have to imagine that's a commonly requested thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some macro or plugin already written for that. But for right now, we're just going to roll with these, and let's go make a couple tickets here. So UI enhancements. Front end component, very important, and we hit it for the alpha. And let's see, we're gonna need to revise the licensing.
So it doesn't automatically assign it to him even though he's the owner of documentation?
Actually, it does. If I were to leave it blank, so watch. I'll do that on the next one. I'm trying to remember. Okay, so another back-end task that we had was make it multilingual. And that actually involves front and back-end work, but let's say the first part of that, just we don't even assign it to anyone just because it's a part of the back-end component. It should pick that up.
else?
I don't remember what the other thing we're going to do. All right, well, let's just call it that. So we've got some tickets in there now. You can see them there. We can see also the roadmap view. This gives us a look at stuff by milestone. And it's useful because right now everything's on the alpha release. But let's say our 1.0 release needs something else. Who cares? Let's just say. It's going to show, the roadmap lets us see our progress. As we move towards these releases, it'll actually show us a progress meter as we cross off the tickets. And so we know if we're way off on the alpha release, we need to push stuff in. Okay, so let's say Ogun goes and does his work to, I don't know, pick a file here. And what I want to show you here now, that was the ticket for licensing. Okay, and actually that was assigned to admin. Trac, because everything, it's this integrated wiki concept, anything can use wiki syntax, and tickets can refer to the wiki, can refer to change sets. It's all, so like if you, what's neat is I'll go into the notes field here and I'll say closed, ready for test, and let's say reassign it. Maybe I happen to be the tester, so I go down here and reassign it to me. And then let's say I'm monitoring the timeline now. Here's that last change that we did. Okay, it's in there, good. I'll go look at the ticket. I can see active tickets. The thing about tickets, you can also, it's like these different custom views here. It's just different ways of slicing the same information. So depending on if I'm logged in right now as admin, I don't have any more tickets. It's kind of just useful. All those things are just queries. So here, let me go into one of them. If you go in here, let's see. So this report, all it is a SQL statement. And so we can write these custom queries as we need to. And this is where if there's stuff like you want to see, what was the ticket type you said that had special?
Use case.
So use cases. Like if this is where we write some kind of custom query and make a different field for it and could pull up a report that would just only show us the use cases that were available. Okay, so one other thing that we figured out just from experience with Trac, Trac doesn't have, Jira has workflows, and Trac does not, and that's a commonly, it's a complaint of Trac. But the way that you kind of can emulate workflows, or at least what we do, is we can go into the admin, and we'll just repurpose the severity field. We'll create something called in development, and ready for test. And we make the default in development. So that way when we go in here and we go, let's say to that licensing that we just changed, when it's finished as a developer, you never close the ticket. You're only going to say ready for test and then reassign it. And then that way, you know, all that stuff, as the tester guy, you just go in, log in, you see what you still have to test. And you cannot physically close your own tickets. So we go in here and then use that severity field and say, okay, yeah, this is ready for test now. And then we probably reassign it to whoever our tester is. And we probably create them their own testing account. Okay. All right, let's talk about the wiki here. And just to show you what I mean by this concept of integrated wiki, this is the licensing ticket. Maybe in the course of changing the licensing ticket, we ran across some issue with the GPL. So we say, yeah, change the license, but might want to check out GPL problems. Okay, and when I camel case something like that, it's going to actually, as soon as I submit it, that's going to see how it's grayed out, it's got the little question mark there? If I click on that, that lets me immediately create a page on the wiki and start making notes and doing whatever I need to do. So so this is just some of that wiki syntax. I know the basic stuff. By no means do I know everything, but there you go. Now we've got a page that's on the wiki that's referenced by that ticket. And from within this page, if we know what ticket that was, so that was number 3. If we go back to our page on the wiki, same thing. We can go the other direction. We can say, if we type number 3, that's going to create a link back to that ticket that we were just on. And once we do close this out, because everything's live here, this concept of like live information, that page on the wiki will now also show that this ticket has been closed out. So that's very useful to just, and you can do that for anything. You can do that for change sets as well. Let's reference a change set in here. That's just done with brackets. Same thing. It shows you right there. Boom. Okay, so
Is there any way of handling estimates and how would I report time wasted if I spent 5 hours on a rug or something like that?
the way that we did that, I mean, you can create custom fields on the tickets and then actually have like a quantity field if you wanted to do that and say this ticket took 10 hours and all to close out. There's no inherent time tracking abilities built into Trac, but again, it's very flexible with how you use it. We use it with the part-time employees that work for us. Instead of having like setting up some explicit time tracking application, we just have them, each create a page on the wiki and just kind of write down what they were working on. So, for instance, if we went in here, go to that main page, edit this. I like to save, like all that stuff is actually useful. I don't want to just throw it away, even though I could get back to that. The wiki's all versioned, so I can always get back to it. But I like to just make a page called Trac Docs, and then paste that stuff in there so it's not on the front page. But then we'd go back here and we'd say like, so Jimmy's, right about here, actually I've got stuff on the desktop. Right, so this is like the wiki syntax for doing a table and then having like the hours on there. And so, a lot of times we'll just have our part-time people just go in, create a page on the wiki for that week, put in the hours. They can put in on here if they want. They can say, this closed out ticket number 1. This day I was working on tickets number 2 and number 3, or change set 2. Save that, and then you can see that stuff and it just gets crossed off as they do it. It's just very easy to reference what they were actually working on. But there's no like ticking clock type of timer or anything built into Trac that lets you track the hours. Any other questions so far?
So you guys actually create the setup for this, and you're setting up SB and you're setting up Trac. Out of curiosity, why didn't you set up the link between the two?
Yeah, the post commit hook, we're going to do that in the next version. It's an oversight. Some of this stuff, like the admin, this little web, the ability to administer via the web, that's a plugin that doesn't come by default, but we installed it and we missed the post commit hook. So definitely in the next version, we'll add that. All right, so let's see. Anything else we want to talk about?
There's nothing for scheduling here?
Yeah, well, the scheduling aspect is like everything that you see. Let's see. You mean like assigning a date to a ticket?
Yeah, like what's your estimated number of hours and what's your estimated completion time and then the progress on each ticket and how much you finished?
That's what you get on the roadmap. As you close out tickets, it gives you that progress bar showing where you stand. We don't, I mean, Trac is very much of like the agile methodology where you don't, like setting dates for all these things, it's very much like roll with the punches and just light yet sufficient, I guess. It's not an MS project. If you're looking for MS project, it's definitely something different than that. But again, it's flexible. How you want to use it, you can repurpose it to do a lot of things. We actually use it in our company. Do you guys know what a CRM system is for tracking customers? So before, like on day one, all we had was what was on the homepage, and it was literally, sales lead, guys, information. Right, so we'd store some guys. Phone number, whatever. And then we're using it to store leads, and then you go and you break this stuff off onto its own page. And it's very much like it lets you do stuff ad hoc as you need to it, and it's that whole concept of fleshing it out organically, not trying to overthink stuff. And then at some point, we had so many leads on that page, we're like, wow, okay, let's set up a CRM system. Same thing for the time tracking app. Same thing for, what do we use it for? We use it actually as like a collaborative word processor for authoring the business plan that we used. Obviously, it was our to-do list, shared bookmarks, we do competitive recon on here, and then all of our technical documentation. And the JumpBox platform itself is built in a Trac JumpBox. So I guess you could say it's self-sustaining at that point. So. But I mean, that's pretty much Trac in a nutshell. We'll go back, we just have a couple more slides on that presentation. It is extensible, and so it's supporting other source control management systems, plugins. There's like navigational elements, this concept of macros and stuff that can exist in the web page. And a lot of people have written plugins for it. Trac Hacks is the site that has all that stuff on it. The deficiencies of Trac, because it's obviously not perfect and there's complaints about it. Running multiple projects, it's not ideal. Really, like as easy as that is to make a new instance using a JumpBox, generally we just recommend people make a new instance. But if you need to have people that work across projects, you can set up a directory for each project in Trac, and then like a component can represent each project, and then give them access that way. The workflows, you saw how we kind of tried to emulate that using a different field in there, but there is no concept of like a pre-built pipeline of this happens and then it automatically routes it to this person and routes it to that person. So support for revision control systems. People have written hooks. It supports Subversion natively, but it works with those others that we talked about. And then it doesn't show dependencies like that. In MS Project, you know how it'll show you that Gantt chart and it'll show you who's depending on who. So there's no really good visualization tools like that in Trac. People have written, I know there's a Gantt plugin for Trac. I've never used it, but theoretically that's what it does. And your other options, like the ones that I know of, Jira, we already talked about. Fogbugs, that's a commercial product. Redmine, if there's anyone who likes Ruby, that's something that looks pretty promising. Bugzilla and Mantis. And then just lastly, how to get Trac. It's all open source, so you can go, you're free to install it. It's out there. Edgewall is the name of the company that is behind it. There are third-party hosts if you don't want to set it up yourself, and then obviously we make the JumpBox available, so if you want to use that, you're welcome to use it. And I brought some CDs, I'll pass it around. It's got the Trac JumpBox on it, as well as actually 9 other applications as JumpBox is. And these are just some useful resources. I put together a screencast that shows, pretty much what we just did. So if there's anyone that you know who's trying to get going with it, you can. That's at that URL right there. And
With JumpBox, how do you make your money? What's your business model actually?
right. So our whole goal is to make open source applications accessible to non-technical people. And so we make them in the spirit of open source. We make everything freely available, and then we just charge for the premium features that we've built. And so stuff like automated backups in JumpBox, if you go, I'll go back here and show you what I'm talking about. So this is our little administration console. We built automated backup functionality, so we can actually have it dump the state of your Trac appliance nightly to a network share, and that way mount it and have your offsite backups that way. You can do other things, set static IP stuff, host it. We also, if you purchase it, obviously you can get rid of the navigation at the top that has our logo on it, and you can also get shell access to be able to edit the underlying VM.
Can you tie into stuff like Active Directory?
Well, it depends on the app. I don't know if Trac specifically can do that. You mean at a JumpBox level? Yeah, no, we don't do that, but we're always taking suggestions. And if you do want all that functionality, it's $20 for what we do. So we try to make it cheap. That's it. Any other questions?
What web server does it run on? Is it Apache or something else?
Yeah, it's using Apache and SQLite as the database. And that's just the Trac one. Every appliance is different. We've got, like I said, there's 10 of them on there. We've got like different wikis and stuff, and they all use different settings. But I know Apache primarily is what we use for the web server.
What do you charge for, say, something like that? This is what you just showed. Your support contract or whatever you guys, what do you sell?
Yeah, so we sell basically the ability to unlock those premium features, and that's $20. And then we have support, which is changing. Normally we had that cheap version, and then we had $150 for a year of updates. And we don't actually support the applications themselves. Obviously, we just support the JumpBox layer. But we're learning as we go. We're a year-old startup, and there's 7 of us at this point, so we're getting there, and we're learning as we go. So. Anyways, thanks for your time. I hope it was helpful.